Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. Members present will be permitted to submit written statements to be included in the official hearing record. Without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 5 calendar days to allow statements, questions, and extraneous material for the record, subject to length limitations in the rules. And as a friendly reminder, I would like to remind audience members that disruption of committee proceedings is against the law and will not be tolerated. Although wearing themed shirts while seated in the hearing room is permissible, holding up signs during the proceedings is not. Any disruptions will result in suspension of the proceedings until Capitol Police can restore order. With that, I'd like to say good afternoon and thank you to my colleagues in the panel for joining us here today for this discussion of Tibet. It is a turbulent time in international relations, particularly in the Asia-Pacific regions where security concerns dominate policy discussions daily. In this environment, some important issues are getting far too little attention, especially on the international stage, and the status of Tibet is one of these issues. It's an important moment to shine a light on the events in Tibet, especially with significant legislations on this topic pending before this committee. Tibet's exiled spiritual leader, the 14th Dalai Lama, and other Tibetan leaders in exile convened a first-of-its-kind conference in October, the 550 Forum. The objective was to establish a 5-year plan for negotiations with China on Tibet's future, or if negotiations fail, a plan for 50 more years of resistance. The context of these discussions is a period of increased uncertainty about Tibet's future. The Dalai Lama has advocated a compromise called the Middle Way, seeking autonomy within China for the people of Tibet rather than independence from China. But the Tibetan people in the world are increasingly forced to consider what will happen after the Dalai Lama's leadership. It's still unknown how the Dalai Lama will choose to determine his succession and reincarnation. But China, having kidnapped the Panchen Lama as a child in 1995 and put an imposter in his place, may attempt to appoint a fraudulent successor. A result that is seen as illegitimate or intolerable by the people of Tibet could cause a wave of protest and resistance, ushering in new heights of oppression. Human rights and personal freedoms in Tibet are already in a poor and worsening state. According to the State Department's 2016 Human Rights Report, the government of China engages in the severe repression of Tibet's unique religious, cultural, and linguistic heritage by, among other means, strictly curtailing the civil rights of the Tibetan population, including the freedoms of speech, religion, association, assembly, and movement. The authorities have used heavy-handed and violent tactics to maintain control in Tibet, especially in response to unrest, including extrajudicial killings, torture, arbitrary arrests, extrajudicial detentions, and house arrests. And Tibet remains extremely isolated. The flow of information in and out of Tibet is tightly restricted. Tibetans are prevented from obtaining passports and moving freely, and foreigners, especially journalists and officials, are frequently denied access. I hope that today the panel can provide the subcommittee with suggestions for policy Congress can pursue to push back against these abuses that we see too often coming out of China. Fortunately, there are 2 pieces of legislation pending before the subcommittee that aim to do just that, and I look forward to the hearing that the witnesses and their impressions of these bills. Representatives McGovern's Reciprocal Access to Tibet's Act of 2017 would promote access to Tibetan areas by denying U.S. visas to Chinese government officials who are involved in restricting access to Tibet. Chairman Emeritus Ross Layton's HCON Resolution 89 provides comprehensive reassertion of U.S. policies towards Tibet, underscoring the importance of Tibetan Policy Act and clarifying the sense of Congress on a number of important issues relating to Tibet. In addition to these measures, I'm looking forward to hearing suggestions for other actions the subcommittee may take to advance human rights, religious freedom, and access in Tibet. Once again, I'd like to thank our panel for joining us today, for your patience while we had to go down and do our constitutional duty of voting. And without objections, the witnesses' written statements will be entered into the hearing record. And I now turn to my ranking member and friend for any remarks he may